One of the most important things that I've looked at with engineers is their skill development. Now, we've heard a lot about skill development before, and those have focused on skills that are technical in nature, how much knowledge you have about a given topic. What we've learned is before we can get into areas like that, we really need to focus on what engineering skills that you have, because without those engineering skills, no matter how much technical knowledge you have, you aren't going to be able to do your job better. The skills that we're going to concentrate today on are skills that we hope will help you be a much better engineer. I have some 14 skills that I've been able to identify, and I'm sure others can identify more, that will be important but are not necessarily technical in nature. As an example, 80% of your time as an engineer is spent doing communications, reading, writing, listening, and speaking. 15% of your time is spent with doing engineering design. Obviously, if you want to work on something that have an immediate impact on yourself and your job, you would want to go ahead and work on your reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills. Other skills that we'll take a look at today deal with things such as team participation, team building, your ability to learn. Now, we as educators in the field of education have failed miserably at trying to impart to students the joy of learning, the need to learn, to be able to keep yourself current and up to date as an engineer. That is something that you can work on to really help yourself immediately. You can also work on management skills, marketing yourself and marketing products. I mean, how well do you and I market ourselves? You also need to improve your networking skills, very important. Design skills, your research skills, knowledge of engineering economics, ability to read contracts, be able to write contracts, finally satisfying the customer. Now let me talk about a couple of these before we get to Jim Watson and Jim Phillips, who will give you a lot more information. Take a look at yourself. Ask yourself a question right now. How many of you communicate orally, be able to speak to an individual, a group of 3 or 4 or 1,000 individuals? How many of you communicate effectively in that area? If you don't, improving those could significantly improve what you are able to do in your job situation. How many of you out there write perfectly? I mean, I was so bad in English when I was in school, I really wasn't concerned about writing. I was so bad in English when I was in school that my PhD committee seriously considered allowing me to use English to satisfy my foreign language requirements. Seriously, being able to write is not that difficult. Unfortunately, throughout our history as students, etc., we've always looked at writing as a creative skill. Engineers don't need to be able to write creatively. They only need to be able to write effectively. Simple sentence, basically standard formats, what I call the Reader's Digest approach. If you do that, you'll be a much better writer. So if you're not really perfect in that area already, please go ahead and look at Reader's Digest and try and develop a format that's like that, and that will significantly improve your skills. Your ability to listen, what you're doing right now. Most of us could learn how to listen better. There is an art to listening, and that's a skill, and can be improved. Your ability to read. How many of you out there can read a professional document, a technical document, without falling asleep? If you can't, well, then you need to learn a few things about how to read. There are a number of other skills that you will need to have to be able to be a better engineer, to improve your employment opportunities. And that works in all fields, education, industry, the government, whatever. Networking skills are extremely important. It is from networking within your IEEE organization that you get the best benefit out of IEEE in being a member. Just being a member and not taking advantage of fellow members and other things that the IEEE give you is a total waste of time. You really don't need to be a member if that's all you can make use of. On the other hand, if you're going to be actively involved and develop a network of individuals that can help you throughout your career, that's one of the best things you can do with IEEE membership. And developing a network is a skill. It's a skill that many of us are born with naturally, and it's one of those things that can be improved. I'm very excited about looking at what each of us needs in terms of our career development and finding out that really if we work on the things that I just mentioned, it can have a significant impact on what your future is going to be like. I won't guarantee that you'll be unemployed, but for people with the skills that I talked about, well developed, well exercised, those individuals will probably have shorter periods of unemployment and will always be able to be in a job that will be a much better engineering job than the ones without those skills. And I don't know about you, but I fear underutilization more than I do unemployment. All right, at this point in time, I would like to turn the program over to Mr. James Watson.
What I'd like to do briefly is to sort of introduce some new ideas that we're looking at that we propose to the United States Activities Board for ways in which we could make some improvements in non-technical skills in particular. Real quickly, we're sort of calling this a Member Professional Awareness Program, and just to put it in perspective, in the past we've really focused a great deal in IEEE on technology, and rightly so. But the present holds a lot of rapid changes for our profession. And the future, we believe, is going to be certainly founded on technology, but a lot more than that. We really need to focus on the technical and the professional skills that will make us successful. Resources have been available in the past from IEEE. It's been an outstanding professional network, a lot of variation in the resources, a lot of information, unfortunately maybe too much information. There's almost an information overload. A lot of distractions lately, especially from our careers. Downsizing, outsizing, whatever you want to call it, has certainly played a role. And therefore, we believe that a lot of the resources, which are excellent, are just not being utilized a great deal. And one of the things that we need to focus on is how these can be better used, and can we bring in the professional skill training in a way in which you can help us understand some of these technical and non-technical skill resources that can be used. I've often thought about our profession. To a great extent, it's a paradox. It's founded on technology, but success, I've discovered after many years as a working professional engineer, is based upon our ability to have non-technical skills. So it's sort of a paradox. You can enter the engineering profession with the technical skills, but we really need to focus on becoming a professional engineer, and there is a difference. The engineering profession, we can enter that if we have basic degrees, like a bachelor's degrees in engineering. We can have advanced degrees, that certainly helps. We can go to technical seminars and keep that experience up to date. We can learn specific job skills, we can certainly do that. And there are some limitations if that's all we do, as far as what our experience will hold over a whole career. Being a professional engineer, I think, is much expanded upon that. It certainly starts with the foundation of education, but that's only the foundation. And registration is an important part of being a professional engineer. But we really need to build on that continuing education from all sources throughout our entire career lifetime. We need to use things like ethical behavior. We need to be good communicators. We definitely need to learn to work as a part of an important team, because that's very prevalent in today's industry. And we need things like leadership and interpersonal skills, especially interpersonal skills. While the focus in the past, as we've considered non-technical skills, very frankly, has been primarily students. It's now time for us to realize that students need this, but so do the members once they graduate. And that's the focus that I see in the future. There's sort of a new approach that needs to be taken at this point then. Not only an audience approach difference, but in the past we focused on providing information. In the future we need to focus on skill training, and there's a great difference there. So we want our members to come out of these meetings with enhanced skills. To at least get started in this area, we have identified 4 areas in which we believe we can make a difference. We call these leadership development training workshops. These are primarily for leaders of the sections and also the societies. Member Professional Awareness Conferences, or MPACs. Professional Skill Development, in which we have workshops where the skills are actually enhanced. And then perhaps the need for funding may require some kind of a staff support, like a professional development director. We believe these programs have a lot of opportunity for our members to gain these non-technical skills. And I'd like for you to think about these programs, and in fact, some of the things you may want to discuss briefly at this point in time would be, are there other areas along these lines that we should consider? And if so, what are they? And what do you believe some of the needs of the members may be? With that, I'd like to address this first topic a little more specifically, and I'd like for Jim Phillips to share some experiences that he has gained over the period of time in which he has sat in many of these leadership roles, and the way in which he approached the use of non-technical skills, networking, and some of these important items as part of the section operations. Jim?
Many people join the IEEE for a lot of widely varying reasons. People join to become members in the technical portion of the IEEE. People join to become members in the professional side of the organization to learn some of these skills that are being talked about. But one underlying common denominator that most of us face is that we join the IEEE to become active, to become involved, to build our professional network, our contacts, people that we can rely on, people that can rely on us. As leaders of the IEEE, whether you're a section leader or one of the other leaders or officers of the organization, especially if you're a section leader, a lot of the sections of the IEEE are different. We have a very diverse background. We have small sections, we have larger sections, we have active sections, and we have sections that are not quite as active. Well, what if you are a chairman of one of these sections, you're building your network, you're trying to put together your organization, and you're from a section that's less active than others? This gives you a little bit of a problem. How is it that you're going to build your network within your section when you have this problem that there's nobody around, that you have a less than active section, a smaller section? This is something that we faced. And the key is to build your own network, to build your organization. You have to build a strong section. And this is something that we've experienced in Akron, something that has evolved over the last couple of years, and something that I want to talk to you about the things that we did to try to build a stronger section. There's a pretty well-known story, it's even been a movie, about an Iowa farmer. And this farmer had a vision, and his vision was he was going to assemble what he thought was the world's greatest team. And he had such focus and such vision that nothing was going to stop him. The whole world thought he was crazy. But he went on, and basically what he did is he plowed under his corn, and he built his field of dreams because he knew if you build it, they will come. A real common phrase, everybody's familiar with this. But this applies to your local section as well. If you have a less than active section, if you have the membership, but it's not an active membership, if you build a strong section, the members will follow. And that's what this is all about. The first place to begin is with the section meetings. You want to have exciting meetings. You want to have meetings that are going to draw people. When I became active in the Akron, Ohio section, they have a long history of a good group, a good organization, a strong organization. But like many sections, they go periods of upward movement and of downward movement. And when I became involved in the section meetings were drawing maybe 10 to 20 people. That's pretty tough to try to build a network under those circumstances. So we needed to begin to build and to begin to make an exciting program to get people involved, to get people active. And I started looking around at some just simple changes that need to be made. And these are changes that you, as the leaders of your organizations, of your sections, can make. They're not all that difficult, but they do need to be looked at. If you have a section that has a less than active type of membership. One thing that was so obvious, at least it seemed obvious, was the meeting time. This really had a big impact on our organization. Traditionally, historically, the section meetings occurred late in the evening, usually around 7 o'clock. Seemed like a good idea, a nice evening meeting. But when you think of the working engineer, and their day is finished around 4 or 5 o'clock, and the meeting begins at 7 o'clock, what are they going to do? Well, they've got some time to kill. they may go home. If they go home, you're faced with everything that the home is going to bring you, and once they're home, it's tough to get them back. So we had to make some changes with the meeting time, and oddly enough, this helped immensely. What we did is we scheduled our social time. We had a social period around 5 o'clock, from around 5 to 6 o'clock. This gave everybody time to get off work, gave them something to look forward to come to the meetings. And that was followed by dinner at around 6 o'clock. And then we had our program around 7 o'clock. And things went very quickly, and it actually became an event that people looked forward to. They were excited to attend, and we saw membership begin to grow. The active membership began to grow. Meeting location was interesting. Again, it doesn't seem all that difficult, but it was something that was overlooked. Like so many sections, the Akron section has a large geographical area. We cover from just south of Cleveland down almost to the West Virginia border. Lots of ground to cover. Well, in the past, what was tried was to hold one meeting on the west side, and maybe the next month a meeting on the east side, and one way down south. And it was a good attempt, but what we were doing was alienating half to two-thirds of the section every time we did this. If you hold a meeting in the south, everybody in the north is removed from it. So one of the approaches we took is, well, we're the Akron section, we're going to hold the meetings in Akron, in the downtown area, somewhere within just a couple of miles of downtown. Everyone had pretty much equal distances to travel in this section. So all these things that I'm talking about are not just nice ideas, they're things that we actually implemented, and they did make a difference in the way the section functioned. One other note with meeting time is also the meeting date. You have to try to pick a date, whether it's the second Tuesday of the month or the third Wednesday. Pick a time that everybody knows, a date that everybody knows is going to be the IEEE meeting. Ours is always the second Tuesday of the month. Unless we have a speaker conflict, it's almost cast in concrete. You have a lot of the regular members that look forward to the IEEE meeting, and they always know, second Tuesday of the month, there's a meeting. Whether they know what the meeting is or not, they know there's going to be a meeting there. The topics are equally important. It's so easy to fall into the trap as a program chairman, where you have people coming up saying, I can give a talk on this, I can give a talk on this. You pull out your calendar and you think, good, you're September, you're October, you're November, I'm done. It's easy to do. And you're going to see the results too, how it impacts the effectiveness of your meetings. Because what you want to do is determine what kind of topics you think the membership are going to be interested in, and actively pursue those speakers and those topics. Some of the best meetings that we had, we were 6 months trying to chase down the speakers, trying to line up schedules because we had topics in mind. One thing that we did, and it was a little bit of a twist, is we went with more broad and general topics. As a technical organization, it's easy to focus on very, very complex technical topics, but you're also focusing on a very small portion of your membership. If you're trying to build up the participation in your meetings, you want to go broader, bigger, general, and current exciting topics. We did such basically whiz-bang things as we toured a mine. There was a proposed pump hydroelectric storage facility in the Ohio area. We had all the members traveling a quarter of a mile in the earth down an old mine shaft. It was fantastic. It was one of the best meetings that we had. We had tours such as the Goodyear Blimp. Akron is famous for the blimp. And a lot of these, not necessarily specifically technical types of meetings, but meetings that really drew tremendous crowds. In fact, one meeting we had, we went up over 90 people attending this meeting. So we've gone from 10 to 20 people to one particular meeting that went up over 90 because of these changes that we made. We were averaging, when all was said and done, around 40 people at each of the meetings. So we made some pretty significant headway. As an outgrowth, as your section becomes more dynamic, more energized, as people begin to attend more and more meetings, you may have a problem that you didn't anticipate. You're going to have people coming to you offering to talk about everything under the sun. Some of these topics may be appropriate, some may not, and it puts you in an awkward position. Keep in mind, what meetings you think your membership wants to hear. Ask your membership, what do they want to hear? When you have people volunteering to give topics that may not be completely related to what you need, you have to be prepared to say no. It's a difficult thing to do, but you have to keep the needs and wants of your membership in mind. If you have topics that come up to you that are what your membership wants to see, by all means, please do this. Use these topics. But if you have topics coming at you that aren't quite what your membership wants, be prepared to say no. You want to coordinate your meetings, your section meetings, with other societies. If you have a power engineering society, industry applications, computer, all the other societies, if you pick a topic that relates to one of these other societies, hold a joint meeting with them, or you'll be conflicting with each other during that given month. If the Akron section has a meeting dealing with power engineering topics, we invite the Power Engineering Society. Hey, that's a neat idea. If you have joint meetings, you expand your network even further. Instead of the IEEE membership base, you're now moving off into the PES base or the IAS base. And a couple of times a year, this is a good idea to cross over into some of these other organizations, and it helps mix things and stir things up. Once you have a pretty good attendance at your section meetings, it's a perfect time to start building your executive committee. And this is what we were able to accomplish. We had about 6 to 8 really strong members. The Akron section has a tremendous working relationship with the executive committee. But now that we were seeing more and more people becoming involved in this organization, we were able to build a stronger, bigger executive committee. We had new problems. We had more people that wanted to be involved in the executive committee than we had positions. As we started to fill some of these spots and build the team from our field of dreams, we had to keep something in mind: diversity. This is extremely important. It's so easy to have all your members coming from 1 or 2 key industries. These industries are important. They're very important. But it impacts 2 things. One is, if you are trying to build a network base, going to a meeting, seeing the same people that you work with day after day isn't going to do it. The other thing is, when there's 1 or 2 key companies that are influencing the whole organization, when that company, as it happens today, goes through a downturn or a downsizing, that can really heavily shake your local section. So it's a good idea to try to diversify, bring in people from other companies, because the neat thing is, you bring people in from other companies, and they start bringing their friends and their colleagues, and this whole thing starts to grow. Well, as we had more people becoming involved, we were actually able to create subcommittees. We're a small section. We never had this luxury before. They were always one-man shows for each committee. We now had subcommittees. We were able to groom to keep this thing moving and have people helping, for example, with the bulletin, with PACE, with a lot of these other activities. So we were really starting to move, and it was becoming fun. But we also had another problem. The more people you have, the longer the meetings go. And we suddenly found ourselves that the people that were becoming involved in the executive committee, after a couple of months, weren't showing up because the meetings were starting to drag on. So what I did, and this was tough in doing, is I started cutting the executive committee meetings to 1 hour. All the discussion had to be done ahead of time. Our executive meetings always follow the formal program. Everybody leaves, but they were invited to stay for the executive committee meeting. When I started cutting it to 1 hour, all the discussion and problems had to be taken care of ahead of time, and we stuck to a pretty strict schedule, which had good points and bad points. A lot of the people that were used to carrying the floor weren't really happy with me. But at the same time, we were able to bring in new blood and keep this thing moving, and people started attending again because they knew it wasn't going to go all night, that it was just going to go for an hour, we get down to business, and we move on. An overlooked group are the student members. Students are a fantastic source for perpetuating your section. We work very closely with the student section. We have people attending their meetings, which is really important. You want to have people attending student meetings to let them know that they're important, to show what they can do, to make presentations for them. Something else that's very important is to let the students know that your door is always open. Leave your door open for them. They're forming their networks. They want to be able to know that they can talk to people in industry, that they have people out there that care about them and that care about what they're doing. Invite the students to be on subcommittees. We had several students on our subcommittees, grooming them for future full committee assignments. What's the one thing that most students do when they attend anything? They travel in droves. They travel in packs. When you have a couple of students attending your meeting, they're bringing another 5 or 10 students with them. Pretty soon you have a highly charged committee meeting and a highly charged section meeting. Another group that can't be overlooked are the older members. The Akron section has a committee called OMAC, O-M-A-C, the Older Members Activities Committee. This is focused on our life members. It's chaired by one of our life members. He sends letters to the people that are older members, the life members. We have profiles. We have a profile of every life member, or of one of the life members, every month in our newsletter. And we do something else. As members approach life member status, which is a highly regarded status, what does the Akron section do? We mug them. It's a little humorous, but we call it our mugging. And what we do is, as a member attains life member status, we recognize them at one of the meetings, we invite them, we take care of their dinner expenses and so forth, and we present them with a crystal Irish coffee mug that has engraved on it, IEEE Akron Section Life Member. This is a really coveted mug. It's not tremendously expensive, but it carries with it a significant amount of status, and they really look forward to this. The thing you have to keep in mind as you build your section, it's not all one person. The IEEE is not all one person. We're over 300,000 members, about 250,000 in the United States. It's not one person. You can be the spark. You can be the spark that starts turning things around and starts making things more dynamic. But you have a lot of help. You have a lot of talented people out there to get things moving. Listen to their ideas, guide them and encourage them, and basically be a really good cheerleader. You can get things moving. And what you're going to find out is this turns out from being a job to being more just a lot of fun, because you have a lot of enthusiastic people and it really gets exciting. What you have to keep in mind is when you start transforming a section from a less than active section to a dynamic, exciting section, it's not going to happen overnight. When you build your own field of dreams, you're going to start out by hitting first a few singles, and then you may move on to a couple of doubles. Then you might start hitting a few triples. But be persistent, don't give up, keep chasing your dreams, because ultimately what you're going to do is you're going to be able to hit your grand slam. And now it's going to be up to you. What happens next is up to you. What's going to be your next move? The time to start planning is right now. And take some of these thoughts, some of these ideas that we've used in Akron that have worked. They've been successful for us. They've been successful for us. And try them in your own sections. It's a lot of fun. What I'd like to do now is reintroduce Jim to discuss some of the other aspects.
Thank you, Jim. What you've just seen is sort of the introduction to a leadership workshop that is being proposed for all of our region meetings. And following this, then, we would have breakout sessions in which the leaders of the sections would have an opportunity to really do some brainstorming and develop their program for the year. And that's a really important part. We have 3 other areas that I'll just quickly cover that are being proposed to increase our ability to actually improve our skills, especially our non-technical skills. One of these is MPAC, Member Professional Awareness Conferences. Very much like the SPACs, which have been quite successful over the last 10 or so years, we would suggest a similar program for members, not students, but for members. We would put together a structure that could operate very similar to the SPAC program. And the idea would be to, first of all, increase an awareness of the need for professional activities in non-technical skill development, and to promote the idea of following these up in the areas with non-technical skill development itself into the workshops. Topics that would be considered would be similar to the present SPAC topics: career growth, job-related issues, professional ethics, social responsibility, self-management, engineers and public policy, the role of the professional society that really is very important to us as we look forward. So these topics could be very useful. By the way, what other topics should we be considering? I want to think about that, discuss that for a moment. This is a list that's worked well with the SPACs, but perhaps we should have different topics for the MPACs. Program structure that we're recommending would be probably a half-a-day session, 3 to 4 speakers, some being local, some perhaps from a national scene, panel discussions, time for networking, social time. These are all important aspects that have been proven in the SPACs, and we think they'd be very important here because we're focusing on the networking. And Charles mentioned that in the beginning. Networking can be very important. Okay, again, what other things should we consider? Is that the right format? Should it be on a Saturday versus a work day? But we need to be thinking about these. You need to have some input into the way in which you might consider these locally. Topics to be considered in professional skill development workshops, different than the MPACs. MPACs are more in awareness. Workshops, skill development. We believe at least 3 major areas should be considered there. Written communications, oral communications, and interpersonal skills. What other ones should be considered? Maybe you've got some ideas that should be added to this list, but this is our start. So you might talk about that for a moment. Very quickly, what we've considered in those 3 areas would be things like this. In written communications, effective business communication, memorandums, business letters. What about resumes, cover letters? How should these be formatted? How can they be effective? Technical reports, research grant proposals, project proposals internally, and even email. We focus on the electronics of email, but how do you really communicate effectively on email? And how do you do it in a way in which is effective with the people receiving that? What about other topics? Perhaps there's some other things that ought to be considered in this time too. Oral communication has a similar list of topics to be considered. Informal presentation. You know, a lot of our presentations are quite informal in our business situation. But once in a while, we also have to give formal presentation. How do we do that? Do you feel comfortable doing that? Do we need more training in that area? Proposals, project presentations, internally, externally, very important. Interviewing techniques. We talk about resumes a lot, but what do you do when you sit across from that potential employer? Can you learn to do that to be a lot more effectively? And another one that is like email is voicemail. How do we properly use voicemail? How can we communicate effectively? What are the topics might we consider in this area of oral communication? I want to think about that for a minute. And finally, interpersonal skills, the third area that we've at least identified initially, are things that are very important in today's successful careers. Teamwork, personality traits. How do you work with different types of people effectively because we're all different? How can you negotiate? Working with other departments, working internal and external to your corporation. Leadership. Jim was talking about leadership as far as operation of section. But what about leadership on the job? Coaching, counseling, listening. What other topics? I think there may be some other ones in this area of interpersonal skills. We believe this is a very important topic, though, for us to consider in these skill workshops. The structure that we have been looking at here are workshops, seminars, flexible design. Each one may be different based upon the needs of the members at that time, but we want to provide useful and specific skills. Not talk about them, but have exercises in which the members will walk away with some of these skills being at least initially developed. And we would do this with professional instructors. In other words, this is a place for quality. And we want the members to come out of these with quality skill development. The final area that we've talked about is just to consider funding for some of these. We have proposed a staff position in the Washington office to try to identify and perhaps secure some of the funds that may be available as part of restructuring of the country to fund this type of development. And we believe there are some there. We've made a recommendation that this should be considered at the staff. Perhaps you may have some other ideas on funding as well. We know of a couple that we're looking at. We know there are a lot of governmental grants, and that's why the professional development director is being suggested. There's also an IEEE reserves for incentives to consider new ideas and new initiatives, and we're going to take a look at that, and that might be also a place we could have seed money. Perhaps you know of some other areas that might be very appropriate for funding. Maybe corporations would be very much interested in participating on some of this as well. So you might want to think about that. So in summary, here's really what we're suggesting. We believe that member needs are changing. I don't think too many people would argue with that. We believe that IEEE needs to be responsive to member needs. We need to do that by having professional information And we need to not only have an awareness of the need for professional identity and professional improvement, but also some actual skill training. And that's the heart of what we're talking about. So with this, I would like to turn it back to Chuck Alexander and say that we've been working on these ideas, and we believe that if you have an interest, if these are targeted to your needs, that we can fulfill a very important role in IEEE providing membership what they need today.
Thank you, James, and thank you, James. Both Jim Phillips and Jim Watson had a lot of good information to give us. I guess it brings me to a point that I would like to make. What we've said today is obvious. The problem is we haven't been doing it. Jim Watson brought out a number of the things that we're trying to get started to help us in this very important area. Jim Phillips gave us something we need to have in order for it to happen. We will not be able to help the members unless there's some kind of a delivery system. You cannot help the members unless you're able to bring this material to them. Now, obviously, we can go ahead and send out a lot of written things, but as I alluded to earlier, when you read something, you don't necessarily absorb it. The best place to learn the skills that we're talking about is through interaction with professionals. And the best place for most of us to do something immediately is right within our own sections. So within the sections, you can help people begin learning a lot of these skills. A very well-run section is one of the best things that you as a volunteer can help us do. In that, you'll begin helping people acquire a number of skills. The people who work on the executive committee probably will get the most out of it. Those will be interpersonal skills, communication skills, the whole range of things. And importantly, the networking skills. So I guess if I were to say one thing too that you need to impart to the membership is, again, like I said earlier, the operative word is active, not passive. If all you're going to do is sit back, not attend meetings, not participate, not network, then your membership is absolutely worthless. I thank you very much for your kind attention. I hope we said some things today that will stimulate you and give you some ideas, some things that you'll be able to do with your own membership. Please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to go ahead and either write us or call us or talk to us. We'll be most happy to speak. Thank you.